Overcoming cancer while I sat in law school. I was 24 hours from death, and at that point, when the Lord spared my life, I knew that I had purpose and I was committed to that purpose. I moved on, and when I ran for state attorney, I did not run on my desire not to seek death penalty. I'd been a prosecutor, I'd been a public defender, a professor of law at FAMU's law school. I had seen a lot, and that wasn't what I stood on. What I stood on was data. What I stood on was research. What I stood on was evidence-based policies upon which we can win reform. When it comes to criminal justice reform, the truth is the only thing that matters. We're inundated with people feeling that they're afraid of it, feeling that this isn't the way to go, feeling that I feel this way, this is how it's always been. But the truth is, it's not working. More people die in prison before they're executed, and we have funded them living in prison until the day that they die. More people are killed, and we're not reducing it. The states that have death penalty actually have higher homicide rates than those that don't. So when I made the decision, I violated no laws. Let that not be mistaken. I understood the statute, I moved forward, and I used my prosecutorial discretion to say that I would not proceed with death penalty. And despite the attempted humiliation from the governor of my state, I feel no shame. I don't regret what I did. I stand because I believe in what I did. I believe that it is legal. I believe that it is proper. And I believe that the NAACP is the organization who knew it from the very beginning. I will not compromise what I believe is right according to the law. This is not a personal opinion. If you look at the data, if you look at the statistics, if you look at the truth of death penalty, it is not working, and I will not stand behind it. I will follow the law, and if the Supreme Court makes a ruling that is contrary, I will live with that. But I did not violate any laws on the front end. They're going to have to fix the law if they want me to go backwards. So I just want to say to the NAACP, I do want to thank you for the honor. I thank you for the work that this organization does and has always done long before I was even born. I want to thank my husband, who has been the rock while I continue to do this, my family support, and baby, you just stand up for a second. This is... And in closing, the one thing that I want to say is that I didn't come out here alone. I met Marilyn a while back, and we've been able to forge a very tight relationship, and it's those type of relationships and these type of organizations that will be the heart of change of this country. Thank you for the honor.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So down in Missouri, a man named Marcellus Williams was set to be executed even though DNA evidence clears his name. So even though the governor did step in the very last hour possible, just think about how many innocent men that were put to death that didn't get that fateful phone call in the last hour.
A Missouri inmate was granted a stay of execution hours before he was set to be put to death. 48-year-old Marcellus Williams was convicted of the 1998 murder of Felicia Gale. Court documents show DNA evidence from the murder weapon wasn't available for his 2001 trial. But analysis of the knife used to stab the woman to death reportedly found DNA from another man. Prosecutors argued other evidence still proves Williams' guilt, but his lawyer and the Innocence Project say they are relieved by the governor's decision to stay the execution. Governor Eric Greitens said in order to carry out the death penalty, there must be confidence in guilt. He appointed a board of inquiry in the case, which will issue a report about whether Williams should be executed or have his sentence commuted.
But in this case, you have a white woman dead and a black man the suspect. So, of course, he has to pay. It doesn't matter what DNA says. And they say they have evidence, but the only thing they have tying him to this murder is an ex-girlfriend who was on drugs and a prison mate, neither of which was there when the crimes was being committed. But of course, somebody has to pay for the death of this white woman. Now, we have known that the criminal justice system hasn't been fair for a very, very long time. It hasn't been equal for black people since about 1640. Yet, time and time again, we are surprised when we don't get justice. In fact, I'm surprised when we do get justice. That is the surprise. And we all know about the school-to-prison pipeline. They turn children into criminals so that they can make money off of slavery. Because if you read the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, it says, except if duly convicted of a crime. But then again, the 7th or the 8th Amendment don't apply to us because we don't get judged by a jury of our peers. And the punishment we get are excessive. And with the privatized prisons, they're making money hand over fist. And by the way, if we want to protest something, we should start looking into these companies that have anything to do with these privatized prisons and boycott them if we want to boycott anything. But, they'll justify all of it by saying, well, if you look at the data, blacks are more violent. Black people are the thieves. Black people are this. Black people are that. We are the criminals. When, you don't want to check who has the criminal history, but black people are the criminals. But when you ask for the source for this information, they have a hard time bringing it out. But even if they did bring out any sources, the question is, what was the methodology that they used to get these statistics? Does it go by convictions? Does it go by charge? Does it go by suspected? Does it go by arrested? Because if it goes by convicted of crimes, black men do more time for marijuana convictions than they do for rape convictions. A white man can be convicted of molesting a baby and putting it online and won't do 1 day in jail.
It's a very strange case and very unusual circumstances.
Wapello County Attorney Gary Oldenburger says not every case is black and white. Craig and Groom's case is one of those. It started as a federal child pornography case.
These guys would troll through those websites where children and teenagers frequent and chat, and they would chat with them online.
He says 2 men pretended to be a teenage girl to Grooms and asked him to perform sex acts.
If they could convince someone to do some kind of sexual activity, they would record that.
Oldenburger says Grooms did not know he was being recorded when he touched the 1-year-old girl in these apartments. Still, some Ottumwa residents told me that's not right.
He should have known right from wrong, but he still did it, and it's still wrong.
One of the most significant factors in Groom's sentencing was the victim's family's wishes.
They were concerned that he'd be on the sex offender registry and that he'd go to treatment, but they really didn't want him to be in jail or to be in prison.
He says Grooms was evaluated by a psychologist and not deemed a risk.
I don't believe that he has a particular interest in repeating this kind of behavior.
Still, the talk of this small town is his lenient sentence.
He harmed an infant, and he needs to suffer those consequences that he did.
Meantime, in my state, if I get caught with an ounce of marijuana, I'm now a felon. But, even though history and statistics are not on their side, they still expect us just to take their word for it. And here you have this black woman, overly qualified, is now catching all kinds of backlash because she wants to do away with the death penalty. Now, even though she has facts and statistics on her side, they still decide to take all of her cases away from her, to basically take her power away. And guess what? They can do that. Or a black man who says, I will not let a black defendant have an all-white jury. His job is taken away from him, suspended without pay. And he is the racist judge. Not the judges who is okay with having all-white juries for black defendants. But when have you ever seen a white defendant have an all-black jury? Name one case where that has happened. Or any jury has been all-black. And I understand that white people are the majority in America. But most of these cases happen in places where black people are majority of the city and definitely do not make up 0% of the population. If the jury is supposed to make up a reflection of who lives in that district. But until we create our own system, our own infrastructure, it'll be the same results. I mean, OJ did 9 years for stealing his own football cards. A black man, Ramad Chapman, was found innocent and was still sent to jail. Just because the judge felt like, or the jury got it wrong and I think he's guilty. So he took it into his own hands. But I didn't see him suspended. I didn't see his cases taken away from him. No, we try to start a petition and get him disbarred. Like they care what we say on a petition. None of that matters until you have a nation backing you up. Until you have an army backing up the words you say. And if we can accomplish the short-term goals like building the economy and rebuilding our families, then we can start being in control of our local areas, regaining control over our kids' education, controlling our own narrative. Then we can start reaching out to people in Haiti and helping them and let them help us. And reaching out to our people in Africa and helping them and let them help us. But until we are in control of our own lands, our own government, our own armies, make our own decisions, we won't be protected globally. Because this happens all over the world. That doesn't mean you have to live in Africa, but if you want to live in West Virginia or Idaho somewhere, or Chicago, or California, or Virginia, you have to have a nation backing you up and a army backing you up. If you're waiting on America to change its ways, you're going to be waiting for a long time. America was built on racism. Racism is the foundation of America. You take that away, then you cripple America. And I don't care how good you think they are, that is not what they want. We all we got. And if we don't do nothing about it, then nothing will get done.
We have some breaking news. The clock running out for Missouri death row inmate, and we have learned now that the governor of Missouri has issued a stay in the execution of Marcellus Williams' execution. That execution was set to happen tonight at 7 p.m. in Missouri. The governor has issued a stay because his attorneys have come out and said there is new DNA evidence that shows that he did not commit this murder and that the 48-year-old is innocent. I want to go to our reporter Scott McLean, who is in Missouri, with more on this breaking news. Scott?
Hey, Pamela, there's a lot to unpack here, but the bottom line is that Marcellus Williams has been handed a lifeline by the Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, at least for now. Greitens, in a press release, announced that he would create a board of inquiry to look into whether Williams actually committed the murder that he's accused of back in 1998. So, for now, the execution will not go ahead as planned. It was scheduled for just about 4 hours from now, 6 o'clock local time, 7 o'clock Eastern. That board of inquiry will be made up of retired judges. It will have full subpoena power to ultimately get to the bottom of this. Now, keep in mind, this issue was at the Supreme Court in Washington. We were still waiting to hear from justices as to whether or not they would issue a stay of Williams' execution. We hadn't heard yet, but obviously the governor has power, regardless of what the court decides, to spare a man's life, and in this case, that's exactly what he's done.
Right, that request went to Justice Neil Gorsuch. Just to give us some background on this case, what are his lawyers relying on to stay the execution in terms of the DNA that has been uncovered?
Yeah, so there was never any physical evidence linking Marcellus Williams to the actual crime scene in this 1998 murder of a local newspaper reporter who was stabbed more than 40 times in her house. In 2015, a judge allowed new DNA testing to be done on the murder weapon, which was a kitchen knife, Pamela, and that DNA testing came back. It showed some mixed results, but 3 out of 4 of the analysts who looked at it said that it should rule out Marcellus Williams as maybe not a suspect, but as someone who had that knife in their hand. Now, the state argues, look, he may have been wearing a glove, and there's plenty of non-DNA evidence to uphold this conviction.
Major breaking news tonight. President Trump has in fact pardoned former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Remember, he was convicted last month of only criminal contempt. Now, we're going to keep showing Steve Harrigan, who's on the ground in Texas tonight, Corpus Christi, in just a second. But this was moments ago, the video you'll be seeing. But on the phone, joining us, I believe his first interview, former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. First of all, Sheriff, I'm very relieved for you. You're 85 years old. You have dedicated your entire life to public service. You came under fire for obeying what are the laws of the land. I applaud the president for what he did tonight. It was the right thing to do, and he telegraphed he was going to do it the other night. But hearing it tonight, how did it feel?
Well, it's great. I love that president. He supports law enforcement, and I'm very humble. If you recall, 2 years ago, I supported him, and I said publicly recently, pardon or no pardon, I will be with him to the end. And I'm going to have a news conference early next week and get to the bottom of this and show the abuse of the judicial system in politics. I'm not going down without trying to defend myself to all those people that don't like what I've done.
Yeah, Sheriff, it's got to be daunting after all those years of public service that here you are, you know, facing a potential year in jail. And, you know, I've known you for many, many years, sir. And I remember when you stood up and you said, wait a minute, these are the laws of the land. I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm sworn to uphold the laws of the land. Others that were also have sworn to uphold the laws of the land are not doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Isn't that really the root of the troubles for you?
Yeah, after all these years, 55 years in law enforcement around the world, and here I am on the defense table because they wanted to do everything to get rid of me, certain people, and I'll discuss that more next week. It's my wife's birthday. I just left the spaghetti and meatballs for you. So 60 years marriage and now birthday, and here, this is a good present for her, too, believe me.
I believe it. Well, listen, that's certainly better than what you could have been facing. If you ended up in one of your own jails, you'd have pink underwear and a bologna sandwich that cost 50 cents. And,
well, it's federal. Sean, it's federal. I could play
be club fed?
Yeah, 3 meals a day. So it would have been all right.
Three in a cot, right?
Yeah.
All right, on a serious note, give us a headline of the abuse of the judiciary before we get back to Steve Harrigan on the ground in Corpus Christi tonight.
Well, first of all, you're a great journalist who kind of broke this story. He's a lawyer, too. But I'm going to discuss all that with my lawyer. I think people will be shocked. They probably won't believe it, certain news media. They're trying to destroy me all these years. But we'll see. We'll try to get the message out Monday or Tuesday.
All right, Sheriff, our best to you and your wife. Thank you for all the years of service. I'm relieved for you, for your wife, for your family, and I'm glad that the president, he did the right thing. There's no question about it, and I'm sure he'll take heat, but he's a man of conviction, as we've all learned, and he is not going to be compliant to what people want him to be. And I think that's why people admire him so much. Sheriff, all my prayers, all the best, sir, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Now, an ex-Madison County Sheriff's deputy set to plead guilty to child pornography charges. Bruce Harvey facing charges including the production of child pornography. He's also accused of taking minors across state lines with the intent of having sex. Harvey had been assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He was arrested back in May. An indictment against him alleges Harvey had contact with 2 girls while working as a karate instructor. This happened between 1998 and 2007.
Protests and counter-protests today in the streets of Boston. You can see crowds starting to gather around the Boston Commons right there. The demonstration was being billed as a peaceful rally for free speech. But after violence erupted 1 week ago in Charlottesville, the city is now on high alert. Local authorities are concerned that extremists like neo-Nazis and the KKK may try to attend. In response, as many as 30,000 counter-protests are expected to show up. Those protesters are also in that area. You can see that wide area stretching all the way down for blocks.
I'm not going to waste my time worried about these Confederate statues. That's wasted energy. What we as black people need to do, we need to worry about getting our education, We need to stop killing each other. We need to try to find a way to have more economic opportunity and things like that. Don't waste. Those things are important and significant.
All right, listen, Charles Barkley, I'm sure, will be pilloried and vilified for preaching common sense, but I think he's dead right. I think that when I look at Kevin Durant and LeBron James using their platforms to attack the presidency, and President Trump, who, you know, I think we're all in agreement he's a reality TV star that's in over his head as the president. I think we all agree with that. But I don't need tall basketball players being the front men for criticism of the president. There's no other race that elects tall athletic people to be their spokesman on social issues. And again, I'm talking out both sides of my mouth because Charles Barkley is a tall athletic person, but mostly he talks common sense, and he's not trying to be the front man for a movement or electing himself as some sort of spokesman. Every other ethnic group, particularly among their wealthy, and these athletes are wealthy, they use their resources to financially support smart people to represent them, or people that are specialized in politics to represent them. We are electing our tallest and most athletic people to represent us, and we look foolish doing it.
Well, I never want to stop freedom of speech, but I do think that they should be careful, because I think a lot of times the people who are talking tend to think one way, and the people who think the other way don't speak out as much. And I think that's why a lot of us were surprised that Donald Trump was elected in the first place. Mm-hmm. So you have to take into consideration that not everyone thinks like you. And when we're criticizing the president, like, listen, he is the president. Mm-hmm. That's just a fact. So I would rather go in the direction of trying to unite than continuously attack. And I think if we can come at it at a place of more of love and understanding than attacking, it will probably be heard better from everyone. But I also don't want to knock a player for using his platform to speak out about something he feels passionately about. Just be careful and thoughtful in doing it.